Welcome everyone to a fabulous best of 5 finals between Scarlett and Skillous. This was in the North America Open Cup on, I want to say January 21st, I think, to be really specific, for no particularly good reason, because I think you guys just want to watch some good StarCraft. You don't necessarily care by which we were given the StarCraft, but hopefully this actually delivers. It's kind of an interesting one, being on the North American server against North American and European, and their history in the bracket is also pretty nice to know. I guess if you want to look that up. We'll get into more detail after the introductions. Top right, kind of, on Data C, it is Scarlett, and bottom left-ish, it is Skillous. I love when maps don't have concrete bottom left, top right. You just go ish, or esque, if you're really fancy and your pinky's out. So, North American Open Cup. Scarlett gets to say, nope, you're going to play North America. Skillous has been playing on North America for, I think, the entirety of the Cup today. He recently played Hero, which was also uploaded to this YouTube. If you guys want to go check that out, should be the previous video. And Skillous vs. Hero was a fun one. Mostly interesting because, again, it is on new maps. So that's the big hubbub of these replays of the Open Cups of the past 2 weeks, is that they have been on the new maps that will be played in DreamHack Valencia, which is probably going on as you are watching this video. So that sucks for the players. They don't have a lot of time to practice, and the way that they practice is probably by doing customs, right? Maybe they do just kind of look at the map and kind of figure things out, or talk to each other about the other people's experiences. Sure, a lot goes into it, but it's definitely a more difficult way to practice than what players have been doing most of the time, which is just laddering. And this is almost like I feel like it's going to be some equivalent to learning about like unionizing and worker shortages in the past, something like that. But this was kind of an interesting history of StarCraft, where there used to be a lot of tournaments, and I'll mention if anything really important is happening here, guys, while I go on my little history lesson. But anyways, it used to be that there were so many tournaments and that it was such an unconstrained system that, yes, you had ladder maps, but you didn't have to play on the ladder maps. You know, it's really synonymous with tournaments nowadays, or the last 5 or 6 years, really. But that hasn't always been the case. Oh, okay, we got +1 air and second Stargate. No, first Stargate. Okay, that was actually so confusing, because I was going to say that the +1 air is so fast, but it's even faster than I was even really thinking of, because I was thinking that was second Stargate. No, it's just actually that early on into the game, and he's already getting +1 air instead of getting warp gate. That's fascinating. So this is gonna look like warp gate to Scarlett. So that's the benefit there, but obviously the downside is they don't have any warp gate. But if you're just gonna go pure Phoenix or Voiders, whatever it is, then Roddy will tell you doesn't think warp gate's necessary. So yeah, there is something interesting here. We'll see what the actual fruits of all this end up being in a couple of minutes. So back to the tournaments. So a bunch of tournaments happening all over the place. They didn't really have to constrain themselves to ladder maps. In fact, some would say that it was actually really nice that they didn't, because the ladder maps are either bad or boring. Either one, both. So they were happy when tournaments would get some of the new maps designed by the community, and then those would usually also be tested a bit more back in the very early days. So that's why you also have LE being ladder edition when you look up maps on custom games, and TE used to be tournament edition. So you could still find the official version of the MLG you just watched, because there were a lot of not official versions that tried to bamboozle people as well. But at some point, probably around 2012, maybe even 2011, honestly, it was pretty early on, players started to argue, right, in favor of making sure that these tournaments all had kind of the same map pool. Certainly, all of the official, like WCS tournaments, the same map pool as the ladder map pool. And that just kind of eventually came to be through a factor of, yeah, kind of bowing to the players' wishes, but then also the lack of diversity in the tournament scene as StarCraft 2 continued to live on. Less and less third-party organizers got interested in it, a lot because of Blizzard's mishandling of the esport. But that is far too much of a detailed topic to go into over a replay. So that's kind of TLDR about maps. So now, like I said, it's really synonymous. Tournament is happening, ladder maps are what they're playing on. GSL being the only current unique one, Special Snowflake. It has 1 or 2 maps that are different. So anyways, we had that super fast +1 that is already on 3 Void Rays. But we actually do get into Warp Gate. This is going to be a true, I suppose, Roddy build. Scarlett has been playing the Defender. We do have a little bit more of an inkling of her plans, though, as we have +1 melee already about halfway done. So definitely going to have pretty much the fastest +2 melee. That's really what gets important. Now, +1 melee can be important if Scarlett's plan was to build about 30 Lings, rush across the map, and try and kill this 3rd Nexus. Or cancel at the very least. This would have been a couple minutes ago. But she did not do that. And probably wouldn't have been a super great idea against someone who has Stargates. Stargate, sorry. But it actually maybe would have worked out in this particular game. Skillous clearly wanting to do something aggressive with these Void Rays. Did not get an Oracle, which is much better at killing Lings. And the one unit he had gotten, the Adept, was actually killed by a couple of Lings early on. It's just that Scarlett could have doubled downed. And she did not. Went into just more drones. And then Ling Baneling. I assume Roach eventually? Oh, no. Okay. So, I mean, regardless of whether she got Roaches eventually, this would be a very greedy build, right? It's just that a lot of the time, the composition is going to be Ling, Baneling, Ravager. So I could see someone just being like, well, why get the Roachborn? I'm not being attacked. Forget about it. Until I actually need it, which is later on when I'm actually going to try and engage my opponent. But no, she just entirely forgoing that portion of PvZ. Getting into the Infestation Pit, I'd be really surprised if this was Swarm Hosts. But I guess I should throw that out as an option. Scarlett doesn't quite know what the follow-up is, seeing that it was +1 air. Maybe she thought there would be possibly 2 Stargates, but I think she has enough information now to know that it wasn't the case. You know, 3rd gases didn't really come down particularly quickly. A bunch of gateways were seen as well. I think she has a transition. Yeah, she's gonna try and go to Hive. And now Skillous has Warp Gate, plenty of Warp Gates, and a bunch of Zealots being warped in. The Scarlett's composition is very fragile. You know, the Roaches provide a little bit of, you know, armor to a composition, sure, but the Ravagers really, while they're also kind of glass cannony, the Ravagers at least create space. You know, the Corrosive Bowels get thrown down, and the Protoss has to respect that. And they're also not suicidal. They can do that, run away, do that, run away, do that, run away. They have some pretty good range, too, so they can poke at some of these Zealots. Things that Lings and Banelings can't really do. If you commit with Ling Baneling, the Banelings are literally suicidal, and the Lings are melee, so you can't, you know, you pretty much just choose to go or you don't. There's no kiting with melee units. So Scarlett's composition is still very scary, looking at it as a defensive Zerg, but now she's got to run by doing little bits, buying some time for her extremely fast Hive. This is 2015 Legacy of the Void feelings here. To try and get to Ultralisks. Now, this still is kind of an interesting composition coming out from Scarlett because Ling Baneling is fragile, very almost over-dependency on Queens, but Queens are pretty good, so can you ever have too many? Then Ultras against Protoss player. Now, Ultras have their space in this matchup, but as far as being reliable, no, I don't think they're so reliable. The reason that this was a build versus Terran mostly back in 2015 Legacy of the Void launch was because 1, Ultras had more armor, and 2, even without it, they were still rather dependable, defensively anyways. We know how bad they are offensively. Not necessarily the case in this matchup, but you know what? Scarlett is holding on. She's got 4 bases going on a 5. She's been handling the Zealot run by is really okay, and that makes sense with Ling Baneling. The Banelings just rush over. But Skillous, has he has he scouted? All right, so this is what I'm worried about, is that I think if Skillous knew that this was the plan, then he's been building double-pumped Immortals alongside Charged Archon, all the great things to have against Scarlett's composition. But he doesn't actually know, and even though he's only seen Ling Baneling Queen, I don't know if that well, Ultras just popped. Without armor, by the way, but by a billion Queens. So I guess they're actually invulnerable. Yeah, that's gonna work. Okay. Now the Immortals start getting... Yeah, I just don't think that Skillous realized that was the plan here. And not be like, if you think about it logically, if you're like, well, if you saw a Zerg go only Ling Bane, Ling Queen, what are you thinking? Maybe you think Mutas, but then you would still scout really religiously about that. And then maybe Stormhost, like I was saying, but you would have seen them already. It's interesting. One thing that I do think is really working out for Scarlett, though, defensively, is that she does do... I think this composition does very well with pokes and prods. So, I don't know if it would do well against this Blink Stalker type of play we're seeing from Hero, but she obviously knew that wasn't going to be this game anyway, so this is just her trying to do it versus someone who opened up Void Rays and then went into Zealot Archon. Which, if it's not in a good enough number, you know, imagine 6 Archons with 2 Immortals behind it. This is a dumb attack, right? But there's just a little too little. So Scarlett thought she could handle it, but Shield Battery plus SimCity plus reinforcements, probably not a worthwhile attack at the end of the day. Just would have been really silly if there was, yeah, again, any amount of Immortals already there. I don't know. Very interesting. And then, yes, defensively, Scarlett might be okay. Like I said, good against smaller groups of units, okay. Good at running around to deal with harassment, you know, mobile army, okay. Offensively, how is she gonna beat out SimCity? And now that there are Immortals being produced, triple Immortals, actually, which is great. It's fantastic. She's not. So there's got to be another plan. There's got to be a plan C or D, wherever we're at. And I hope Skillous is mindful of that as he witnesses this army composition currently do nothing. There's got to be another plan. Because really, the only thing I would be really critical of Skillous right now is the lack of scouting. He didn't get an observer across the map, which makes sense. It's not usually guaranteed the observer actually gets to go into the main base and see a hive, spores, queens with overseers, whatever. But then also no sentries, so no hallucinations. So that's just a byproduct of the composition that he's gone for. But if you are sitting there being like, what the hell, you'd still usually do something. Even force the Warp Prism harassment a little bit more can be what you use as scouting. So I guess that's what I was trying to do earlier on. Kind of effective till Infestation Pit, but then still wasn't expecting Ultras, I guess. I don't know. But needs to have another scout. The Greater Spire and the Spire combined together. It's very scary. It's going to be a very fast and powerful transition. And if Skillous isn't prepared for it, because he's like, oh, Archons and Immortals, right? These things are not good at dealing with Broodlords. Archons shoot up, but they got T-Rex arms. Immortals don't shoot up, and no splash either, so they're not even good at dealing with the Broodlings on the ground. It's gonna suck. And I'm afraid that Skillous is playing perhaps too passively. Okay, no. Well, he still might be too late. This might be kind of one of those games where Skillous is very familiar with a certain pace of a PvZ, but because this is a off Zerg, doing something a little bit weird, the pacing is kind of, it's not instinctual, you know? So he's thinking, yeah, there should be a follow-up. This can't possibly be everything that she has. Okay, Broodlords, but that okay Broodlords is coming a little bit later. A little bit too late, perhaps. I am saying perhaps, because, you know, it's actually not that hard and fast of a transition. She didn't have that much gas, and she still has more supply kind of stuck in these units that aren't doing anything. So, seems like this might time out okay for Skillous. Might. Where is all the technology, by the way? Just right at the front. It was on me. Okay. Well, Warp Prism is gonna... Nope, that's a Void Ray. No Warp Prism? Warp Prism with the army. Okay, let's see if this can actually bust through the Broodlord army that's building. So it's gonna be 9 Broodlords, a handful of Infestors that do have a lot of energy, and that's the Wombo combo. So the Archons, while they can technically, you can force the issue, you can try and push them through whatever's on the ground, and the Broodlings as well. If they're fungal, they really can't do that. So in that case, Skillous just is like, oh, whoops a daisy, and gets the hell out of there. Wouldn't have been able to physically push past these queens, and then even if they did, the Broodlords would have lived forever with those transfuses. So Skillous really needs to move on, and like I was saying, it seems a little bit late. Given an extra 30 seconds, because Scarlett couldn't just instantly get 10 Broodlords, okay, but that still might not be enough time. But Tempests are on the way. we get up to 6 Tempests, I'm gonna feel a lot more confidence. Yeah. Which I think we're getting there. Scarlett's not particularly good at pushing with this composition, although I do love her attack path. She got this base up and running, built a lot of static defense. I think that Skillous actually saw, and then now is able to kind of leapfrog over to this base, which means that she is both protecting her own bases with her army as well as attacking her opponents. Now, if this gets anywhere else, if Skillous has another army of like 20 Zealots and DTs and whatever hitting the north side, Scarlett doesn't have very much to defend against that. But that's the trick, is that you would have to make sure to split rather correctly and not just devote 20-30 supply into harassing units and then not have enough to defend against Broodlords. But I feel like Skillous is going to have a lot of time bought with this current composition. Okay, well, the next might go down anyways. All right. Yeah, it's only on 3 Tempests, 2 more about to pop. Upgrades are trying to finish up as well. Storms are coming down, surprisingly enough, but also High Templars are dying in the process. And I think this Nexus does have to be given up. That's very unfortunate. This is a different map as well. And Skillous had maybe a bit of an easier time taking this 5th base, because it's kind of a weird one. Clearly didn't plan on it with his gateway placement. And I don't know if this is like such a big deal. Skillous probably would have either already been taking it as his 5th, or would have said, oh god, I'm in trouble, and then taken it with the bit of a bank that he had. Ooh, I love this. Classic Wings of Liberty. Bring the Immortals with the Warp Prism, warp in the Zealots, target down some of the more important structures. Gets the Greater Spire. No more Broodlords for a little while, and as well as a second upgrade. Tries to punish Scarlett's retreats, but it's just so damn difficult to do when her army is just so good at lasting, basically. It lasts forever. And with that many Broodlords, especially if they have a target fire, they are going to take down all these units very quickly. And the only thing that really stopped anything was the Tempest count. Even that's being destroyed. It wasn't even that many Corruptors, but they're being helped out by the Queen, so... Yeah, I do think the Tempest just came a bit too late. If Skillous had 6 Tempests right as the 5th base over here was canceled, right as he realized he was in deep shit, I think he could buy enough time to get the 9 Tempests. And then that's a different story where the 4th might have survived, or at least it was more of a tug of war, but this was a very different Zerg, and I really don't think Skillous was prepared to deal with this. Not to mention this is on North America. Not necessarily the ping being the issue, that's not why I'm bringing it up, but just the fact that it would have been like 4 in the morning for Skillous in the finals. So his brain probably is not working quite so quickly. But anyways, it's just a very different game coming out from Scarlett on a different map as well. No doubt making Skillous kind of hesitate, second guess himself on certain factors. And at the end of the day, that looked very one-sided. I can't imagine that it happens that same way, though. Things are going to be drastically different for game number 2. So let's get into it. It's a 90s song called Come On and Ride It. I love that song. Hope this becomes Roddy theme song. You gotta let him know about it. It's a game plan just to defend at home with Queen, gradually break your opponents. I mean, yeah, the problem would be that that wouldn't have worked. So, is the end goal with that composition to always get to Broodlords? Maybe. Maybe the fact, the idea is that you wouldn't be able to break the Protoss with Ling and Baneling Ultra. You would always keep them on their heels. So you could freely go into Broodlords. I don't know. I'll have to watch some more of it. We move on to Cosmic Sapphire. Certainly the largest map in the map pool. That much I remember. Top left, Scarlett. Bottom right, Skillous. And Scarlett just played a drastically different style of Zerg versus Protoss. Now, I would talk about how this could be a reaction to the Blink Stalkers, like I did mention in the last game. It definitely wasn't in that game reaction, because she saw it was Void Race. But I mean, as far as the meta goes, there could be some attempt from Zerg players to also improve and change up their style of play, and with the new maps as well. But I don't think that's true either. I could go into that, but I'm not, because it's Scarlett. And Scarlett has always been very experimental. She has always done what really wacky builds, cheesy builds, different styles of play, compositions. I mean, she's occasionally stubborn in her feelings on I guess, not even balance, but like bullshit units, right? We see her still, after all these years, sometimes complaining about adepts or even occasionally reapers. You know, that was a thing back in the day. But while she might be kind of funnily stubborn on that side, in a sense, she's absolutely not when it comes to her gameplay. I mean, she is willing to look at other people's styles and responses and say, well, maybe I could do that. She just isn't quite as instantly, I guess, malleable, maybe? Like, I feel like she's not exactly the example of someone who just sees something and soaks it up and is like, boom, I've already got it. I'm like, I'm leading the path. I'm a trailblazer, but she's pretty close to it. I think maybe in her defense, like, the problem would be that she can sometimes maybe be too experimental, like too many things. Just comparing her to the likes of a Max Pax, which he is a really hot topic because of the way that he's been able to kind of prove how StarCraft can be different with PvP, or Hero, who is now proving it with his PvZ. They do have multiple builds, but usually, you know, on Max Packs especially, you're gonna see him just hone in on this new thing. He's like, I got this new thing and I'm gonna make it perfect. And then for Hero would probably be the epitome of, you know, the player that can just say, this sounds like a good idea, I'm gonna do it, and then make it look good with his build orders and compositions and decision making. Because he'll do the thing with Blink Stalkers that you're like, don't do that, and then he does it and then he wins. It's like Scarlett isn't quite onto that level on Hero in that sense. And she also isn't like Max Packs, where she just chooses a new thing and then just like hammers it over and over and over again. I think she does do a lot, which maybe sometimes backfires. In the same time that she just demolished SOS in the Pyeongchang finals with a couple of different builds, including some cheesy builds, she's also just kind of fallen flat on her face against other professionals, you know, in finals or round of eights or anything like that. So she is I think Scarlett fans will know that she is very, not exactly hit or miss, but there's 100% and then there's 70%, you know? Skillous is more along the path of, how to say, like, he's on the road to greatness, which is kind of cool. Scarlett has proven herself to be great, but perhaps more so on occasion, not super consistently. Skillous is trying to get to that consistent greatness, but he's still, like, his graph is still going up, right? Scarlett's went up, kind of hit the level, and then goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Skillous is just so far straight shot up, with a little couple of dips that go along with when you start to hit a new level in anything that you do. So that's kind of cool between the two. But that's, anyways. Just kind of feeling out how they play, because last game was so unique. And then there's that possibility that Skillous also brings out the still rather unique style of play of the triple Oracle Blink Stalker build. We're still waiting on that. It is so far triple Oracle, so I'm kind of feeling it. Already some damage being done to Scarlett. 6 drones go down to 2 adepts and an Oracle. It flew in. Overlord, I think, saw the 3rd Oracle. So that should already indicate a possibility for that Blink Stalker build. Now, triple Oracle into Charged Archon also used to be a thing before the Void Ray meta. But while that is possible, yeah, I think it is still possible. I'm not even gonna say that, you know, it's not good anymore. I still think it's possible that Skillous does that. I am going to predict he actually goes Blink Stalkers, though, just because he has done it before. He's also experimenting with it, you know, before Hero kind of made everyone believe it was only him doing it. And then I do believe that Hero's style of play is opening up more opportunities for the way Protoss plays. Not just by nature of having, you know, Blink Stalkers versus Charge, but by the way that Blink Stalkers can themselves compositionally open up ways that can be played. Charged Archon was more of a just run across the map and butt my head into the Zerg. Hope they don't have enough, right? You do that with a warp in of Zealots from a Warp Prism somewhere. Oh, 2 Oracles just went down. And that's your brilliant maneuvering. With this blink play from Hero, there's a couple of different things. There's all these different builds that happen. 3 base versus 4 base, kind of a fake 3rd base. We're talking about +1 attacks versus completely disregarding. I think Hero would be the type of player who also just went for a 2 base blink attack, which you might say that sounds stupid. It's a thing, and I'm sure he could do it again. He also loves bringing out old builds. And then as far as the actual macro game with this composition, we're seeing so much more push and pull, left and right, harassment, dropped, and then, well, not drops, but then Warp Prism harassment into an attack on the left with some charges on the right, and then a Blink Stalker Bulk leading up creep in the middle. It's so much more like TVZ. Where, yeah, even TVZ can get kind of to a certain point. People figure it out. You do this, then you do that, then you push down the middle with your tanks. Sure. There's almost always a more flexibility in these TVZs. And PVZ, I think, is getting there. Getting a flexible point. Very big map, by the way, guys. So the fact that this is a macro game through and through is not at all surprising. Scarlett has not gone into the Ling Baneling wave of playing. She did out on a Roachmorn. And is getting +1 missile. Going into Hydralisk End, so no doubt thinking about those lurkers. So Skillous, he should start applying pressure. Okay, there is the Warp Prism. There you go. So he should start applying pressure. Even if you're going for a macro game, the Blink Stalkers are supposed to be used kind of like 16 Marines in a medevac. 2 medevacs. Clearing up creep, threatening, being the look over here hand while the other hand does something, you know, more dangerous. So you gotta be on the map, and that makes it a very difficult style to execute. It's a very fast style when you're doing it correctly, and right off the gate from 3 bases. It's also a style that requires a lot of multitasking. So we've seen it work really well against someone who was trying to go into Ling Baneling Ravager. Haven't seen it tried against someone who's going straight into lurkers. I think this would be effective against a lurker player before lurkers are out, first of all, which makes sense. But before lurkers are out, you can kind of get the snowball started so that they might eventually get to lurkers, but then they only have lurkers and they're still effectively dead. And I think it would do well against lurkers that don't have the burrow upgrade, so they're not very mobile. But I think if Scarlett actually does get to this hive, gets the burrow upgrade, which I think she should get first in this game. We'll see if she does. I figure they're better than what Skillous has to throw at her. I would figure that. But it's going to be my first time seeing it, because Hero did it versus some more standard ways of playing, I guess. And Immortals being pumped out as well. Charge, Storm, and +2 already finishing up. Scarlett is about to finish her hive. Just getting the Hydra upgrades, in case she does need them, I guess. I'd assume most, if not all, of them are going to be lurkers. And Skillous has not been able to apply much pressure at all, which is actually a bit of a problem. There's a lot of pathways on this map, which means there's a lot of avenues of creep spread, which means that if Scarlett especially is the one you're playing against, you have so much of the map that needs to be accounted for. Because while this portion of the map might be the most important, it's where you're eventually going to push, you don't want the creep over here blocking your would-be 7th. I mean, that would just be insane. There'd be so much vision. It would literally see this Warp Prism. So, there's pluses and minuses for both sides as far as how the creep works on the larger map. So the maps that have more alleyways versus just one big center kind of thing. But, yeah, for me, I look at this and I'm like, it's so easy for Skillous to kind of lose track of the left side of the map. And Scarlett has all of these spaces. Or not all of these spaces, but all this vision. And we got some action, actually, so whoopsie-daisy. A little bit of multi-pronged harassment from Scarlett, while she also defends the main engagements. Skillous doesn't really see what he's getting into. Trying to open up some of his own harassment opportunities, though. I do love that, but Lurker's just so aplenty. Running around everywhere. They're dealing with the main attack and this attack, but the Zealots on the left finally finding some attack pathways, killing a bunch of drones. And the main base is actually where a lot of the drones are being killed. So looked like things were under control for about 15-20 seconds. And then quickly we see the 32 kill counter on the drones. And we respect the multi-prong a little bit more. But even with that looking better, it's still not all that great. You could certainly argue. Scarlett still has a huge mineral bank, so replacing drones specifically is not a problem. And she did, you know, she wasn't taking any damage as far as to her army, although apparently she lost a Viper, which is actually really nice. But, you know, not much else, right? So the army is still very good. It's upgraded as well. She did get for both upgrades, actually, during that time. And now it can go for the counter, which is really scary. And Skillous, if he was in controlled situation still, if he was blinking around, attacking in 4 or 5 different places, it's possible that Scarlett doesn't have enough lurkers defending any one location. So Zealots around them, Immortals bust them, whatever. If it's just one glob of Zerg army, Skillous' ground army cannot defeat it. So it's really important that in this game, he transitioned faster into those Stargates. The carriers are already out. They're going to try and help out. But there's only 2 of them. They don't even have +1. And the ground army is still going to get wrecked by all these lurkers, man. The interceptor count is not high enough, so even though we're very, very low on Hydra, it doesn't seem to matter. Skillous is slowly being torn apart, and if Scarlett could just get some reinforcements across the map, she'd probably already win this one. But that is currently a bit of the dilemma. A bit. The fact that there's not more carriers is such a bummer, actually. If there is 6 carriers with +1... such a different story. Such a different story. Scarlett's actually over-invested to this, right? If she saw 6 carriers, she just would have skedaddled. But no, this might have just been the perfect timing from Scarlett, which really wasn't even just her sense of duty to attack as a Zerg player. She literally just cleaned up all of Skillous' harassment. She deflected his main engagement and then cleaned up, you know, a good 20-30 supply of warpins that were trying to attack further bases without losing her army. So of course she would have counterattacked, and that was that narrow gap that was kind of had to be hit by Scarlett. Not that she wouldn't have been able to play out versus Skillous' late game, but if she wanted to win right there, right now, that was absolutely the way to do it. If Skillous was given 30 more seconds, or if he was 30 seconds faster to the carriers, or if he didn't actually kind of sacrifice as much as he did, kind of poked the bear and then made the bear realize you're not actually prepared to defend yourself, then he's probably playing into the late game on 5 bases right now in carriers. But that was a perfect timing to do what Scarlett did, and Scarlett is currently just wrecking face. Skillous can't really catch a break or get any control over these games. We'll see if that changes in game number 3. Thank you very much, JedTN, for the 2 gifted subs, and as well as for your own resub, 15 months. Thank you very much. My timer, my alarm clock went off during that, and it's so loud.
Resubscription received. Apparently you are doing something right, Captain.
And some travel stuff figured out. Thank you, Ashal Kiku, for the 6 months. Hey, the new map pool is just, it's such a breath of fresh air that it's almost impossible to truly evaluate it. People like it just because we're desperate for it. I like them, though. I think they're pretty varied, and they definitely look more varied. And looks are important, okay? All right. Shoot. Whoopsie-daisy, guys. Now we got the correct buttons hit. Bottom left of Tropical Sacrifice. It is Scarlett. And top right it is Skillous. So I'm starting to think that this might be just a good map for Protoss in general, but I'm gonna like hold off on that actual evaluation for a while. I feel like I've seen really good things happen from Hero on this map. I'm not exactly sure why, even. Trying to think through. It just the way that Hero is playing up PvZ is really like tainting my my opinions here. It's just it's like, is it Hero? Is it his PvZ style? Is it the map? This map, I've pointed out, just kind of leads to people having their own side of the map. You can kind of draw a line through the middle and say, like, those are obviously yours or mine. And with the first 4, really 5 bases being on your side of the map, very definitively so, you don't move closer to your opponent when you take a 3rd or a 4th, like some other maps. I feel like it does encourage, 1, macro games, and 2, it encourages a little bit more of that harassment style. Well, I mean, yeah, because doing 1 big push on this map just sounds like it would lead to a disaster, not because of the way the maps are designed, but just because the way that the map, the bases are designed. But the map itself, I don't know if you could really push only over here and find a lot of success, but if you pushed here and then also here and then also here, it's a kind of a wide or long map. And if you try to just do 1 big old push, it might be easy to defend against, or you might be getting counterattack while this is going on with all the avenues available on the map. So that's what we saw from Hero. So again, is it Hero? Is it his PvZ? Is it the map? I don't know. But everything combined together made this map look really abusive for him, as he would just split off 2 or 3 groups of units, and the Zerg player would have a real struggle trying to defend everything perfectly, as splitting Roach Ling is not exactly difficult. All fast units, all units that usually they're either maxed out with, so there's a lot of supply to move around. But to split them perfectly, you size up your less quality and more quantity units against their more quantity, or more quality, less quantity. Like, it can be very difficult. So we saw Solar got picked apart in this map. If Skillous once again tries to go triple Oracle, Blinkstalker, we could see the same thing happen. The last game didn't end up looking so hot for Skillous. It was 1 brief moment of excitement where all those Zealots are doing damage, and then I pointed out, you know, pretty quickly. I didn't get too excited. Well, the army supply is not that different. The army is still a huge threat. And Skillous's transition is quite late. Well, contextually late. But he also started off that game by just not getting much done with the Oracles. The Oracles were, I'm sorry, Skillous, but they were quite bad. They're quite bad. They didn't do a lot of damage, and then 2 of them died. One of them just because they overreached. The second one, I think, was just kind of floating a bit too close to the queen. So, whoopsie-daisy. So I think that that's supposed to go a lot better. So even if he had gotten 2 or 4 drones where he shouldn't have, and you're like, well, something happened, it's not worth the 2 Oracles that were lost. And not just because of their direct damage done. You could argue 2 Oracles lost in some games. If they killed 12 drones, well, maybe that's okay. 16 drones, let's say. Maybe that's okay. Well, even then, it's always a bit questionable, but especially with the style of play that follows up these Oracles, I think it's almost like a 2-1-1 where people mistakenly think that the 5-minute timing is supposed to do a bunch of damage. So they're really eager. They're really risky when they do it. They're like, let's go for the main, and then they get pushed back, and then there's no map control because the Zerg's like, well, okay, whatever. When, yeah, it absolutely is more so about that map control and the little pokes and prods and leading up to the follow-up that's really important. I think the Oracles have the same station in this matchup with this type of play, is that they're more importantly kept alive. So even if you get big money, you get 20 drones, but all 3 of your Oracles die, and it's only 6 minutes into the game, you might be like, well, 20 drones is a lot. And that is a lot, so maybe that would be okay. But then you'd honestly be questioning, is that exactly what you wanted to do with it? 20 would be a lot. I don't think I've ever seen an Oracle get 20 drones. So maybe my numbers are a bit off here, but hopefully you get the get what I'm putting down. You're picking it up. Because the Oracles just need to constantly be a thorn in the Zerg's side. So maybe if there was literally 20 drones just sitting unguarded, you would go after it, but otherwise, stasis traps, offensively, defensively, little harassment, finding queens that are alone off creep. Or in Hero's case, and this was really what was an additional added benefit of Hero's style of play, they could be used offensively to defend, like, against Roach all-ins. Or they can be used offensively to crack the person who does have barely enough roaches for only the stalkers, but not if you include the Oracle Pulsar Beam. Now, I talked a lot about the Blink Stalker way of playing, but it is actually charge, so a bit lame, honestly. I'm not as excited. But regardless, the 3 Oracles are still alive, still doing some damage, picking off little bits here and there, and that is much better than what they were doing last game, where 2 out of 3 just died. So now, Charge Lot Archon, a little bit more of the one big push, and then usually a Zealot run by, but then that's kind of it. Kind of have that opportunity, and then it goes a bit more into the Zerg attacking you. But it could still work. Like I said in that second game, as much as I like the Blink Stalker play much better, just it's more fun. And it does seem to have more merit done correctly. There's nothing necessarily wrong with Charge on Archon. It just fell out of fashion. Okay, well, this sucks. It's up as being caught. Yeah. This fell out of fashion when the Void Rays are so good. Now things have changed. Queen walks aren't really possible anymore. You see this doing a lot of damage. Scarlett's gonna try and get to a Spire, which is something that Skillous might not know about, or ever scouts, but might work out still coincidentally one up with an engagement from him. He's getting to a 4th base already. 8 gateways, though. War Prism is available. I would expect Skillous to move out in the next 30 seconds, actually. And if he does that, then Scarlett's got to make that decision. Classic decision. Build mutas or defend against this engagement. But if Skillous just stays at home... Well, okay, he's just gonna stay at home. Alright, then. Then, yeah, okay, you got 4 bases, but you don't know about the Spire, technically. Oh, he just sees it. Oh, wow. Okay, interesting. And he was already building at least 1 Phoenix, which is kind of funny, so it just goes right back into building more. Okay, well, then this can still be totally fine. It's a bit doom and gloom without the Spire being scouted, but with the Spire scouted, I think it's fine. Not even because the Phoenix gets started up again, just because, you know, there's no awkward, oh, I'm moving out, oh, JK, I'm not moving out, oh, I don't have any sack defense in some of these bases. There's gonna be sack defense, Skill's gonna have units in position, and yeah, he's gonna have actual Phoenix. Something that Scarlett sees, so she know the jig is up. And she didn't really commit to any mutas anyways. In fact, Corruptors are on the way. Second Stargate, actually. Because Skillous is on 4 bases, I just like it. I don't think this is... This might technically be a reaction to the possibility of mutas, but it's also one of those things where even if you don't end up using it for building 2 Phoenix at a time, you are wanting to transition to late game Sky Toss. Probably in the next couple of minutes. So you're gonna have that option open and available. If this was a very tight game and it was 3 base for Skillous and he had to really pick and choose where he was putting his resources, that second Stargate would be useless. It would suck, but I think right now it's actually pretty good. This observer is getting... Ah! Sorry, guys. New keyboard, or old keyboard, that I'm using because my luggage was lost. Just rewinded by 10 seconds. I was gonna say, this observer is getting a lot of information. It's gonna see pops from the larva here. Moves over, sees the Spire upgrading. So they're gonna see some of the production from this hatchery. That's nice. Not usually something that happens too in this matchup. Usually it gets caught by a spore, just a overseer running around. Some Zealots going for a run by, catch a couple of Queens, so that really is all that is happening. Skillous trying to take his 5th Nexus. And this is an extremely passive game. So Scarlett maybe gonna go into Broodlords again once this upgrade finishes. Gonna time out with a Hive almost. Skillous will have, as I was saying, a fairly fast transition to multiple Stargates. Just needs to add the Fleet Beacon, really. Scarlett's encompassing the map with Creep as well as Overlords, so I think we should really be getting by her Warp Prism Should be caught up pretty quickly. Currently tucked in over this lovely little ocean. So she's not going to see that. But there's that Greater Spire. Just seemed like the only logical choice. And these Corruptors look like they were specifically made to take care of the War Prism, which they do finally find. But now, of course, they can just turn it into Broodlords. Now, Scarlett has to be careful with this portion of the game, right? Because it seems like she's got a plan, and that plan seems pretty good. It does. But what if she has to pull the trigger, either defensively, the Skillous pushes out, she's got to use her Banelings and her Roaches, or if she thinks that she has a good engagement and attacks and is incorrect about that, then she'll be caught in a very awkward position. Her composition isn't technically better than Skillous's, although this wraparound to find all of those High Templars was really nice. So if she has to take an engagement on her side of the map with this army, it's not going to be that great. And then she's going to have to reinforce, replace all of the army that she lost, which means she's not going into Broodlords. And it's going to be... A lot of the reinforcement paths are going to be covered by the army that is encroaching on your side of the map. So this is the true awkward part for the Zerg. If Skillous was more passive and just went right into those Stargates for fleet beacons, carriers, whatever, then Scarlett gets to do whatever the hell she wants. But Skillous finally making a move at a very good time is catching Scarlett when she really doesn't have enough to throw here. The Ravagers weren't even critted until just a couple of seconds ago. They do manage to find that War Prism, but that's really all she has. More Banelings are finishing up, but even not that many against that many units coming from the Protoss, and her supply is kind of telling the tale right now. And now this is a pretty easy fight for Skillous. Doesn't even really need any storms. Banelings try to hit the heart of the army, and they kind of do. And there's even some remnant Banelings to hit most of those Zealots, but this is all a losing game for Scarlett, who is thrown back to 3 bases. She is trying to replace her 4th and get a 5th as well, but Skillous is on 5 bases. There's 2 more Stargates and the Fleet Beacon as well. So now there is really no hope for Scarlett to be winning this one. The supplies kind of look like they could be okay, but of course, Protoss vs. Zerg, that would never be okay. GG. So Skillous does fight back. That was definitely a more awkward game for Scarlett than the previous 2, where she had a plan, but she wasn't necessarily in control of the whole situation. Just got caught on the defense without a very good army, and then could not reinforce consistently enough when it's just literally knocking down your door. So we'll see what happens in Game 4. Can Skillous actually start the true comeback and take the best of, or will Scarlett close it out in Game 4? Let's see. Yeah, I'll tell you guys when this was and who they beat who and whatnot. What could Scarlett have done differently in order to turn that game around? I actually think that she needed to do some more like multi-pronged or actually be the aggressor. So that the key there for a Zerg is I think that you never actually aggress, you never actually dedicate to the aggression, because really you don't have the better army and you are just wanting to get to Broodlords. But I think you have to posture, basically. But then other things that could have been improved. She didn't have her Ravagers to defend that. I guess it was a 6th, actually, the very top left base, which could have bought a lot more time. It seemed like she didn't think that Skillous would ever push out, and then he did, and she was like, oh shit. Let me fix that. All right, let's go on to game number 4. So game 4 will be on Moon Dance, which I actually have not cast yet when it comes to professionals. I, funnily enough, cast this for one of the subscribers who played on it during TLMC, I believe. But that's literally it. So this is a new one for me. Seems to be less chosen out of the new 7 maps. They just entirely updated the map pool. So we'll take a little overview of this all together now. After the introductions, bottom right, Scarlett, top left, Skillous. By the way, Skillous probably won't be teamless for very much longer. And Scarlett is very comfortable at Shopify Rebellion. Okay, so let's take a look at the map. This is almost a relic from the past. The safe expansion is I'd say it's old school at this point. The last one I remember is Orbital Shipyard, but I don't think that's correct. I don't think that was literally the last one. It's the one that pops up into my mind. But there used to be a lot more, well, not a lot more maps, but there were, in the last 6 years, number of maps that had a safe natural drastically fell down around like 4 years ago, 3 years ago. Beginning with Legacy of the Void, because they reduced the mineral patches, I think there was a little bit of a push to increase the safety of the bases, as they were worried that this would be too hard of a game. But anyways, it got out of our system, and then we were like, yep, no more of these hidden bases, the safe bases, because they actually encourage maybe too much turtling. Now, is that true? Maybe. But do we want to see more experimentation in StarCraft 2? Absolutely. Which is why it's like the only reason I give any credit to 4-player maps, or 3-player maps, either way, is that at least it would be saying that we did something new. Because there just isn't very much else happening right now. So you can see that no one's actually taking the safety base. It is less minerals and only 1 gas, which I think is a fair trade-off for how safe it is. It now comes down to being a base that you might take in a very wacky, okay, I just need to get 1 more base up type of situation. So, for instance, if Scarlett's having trouble getting her 4th saved, and she tries to take it, gets canceled, is fighting for her life, then she takes this one. Maybe she actually gets the mining going, and it pulls her back into the game. But otherwise, you are absolutely going to save that for last. And there's not just the safety reason for it, the, well, what if reason for it. Like, well, what if it's the only thing I can take in the future? It's also because forward bases do have some benefit. Now, Zerg usually don't take forward bases, that is a base that is closer to your opponent, as they're seen as the more defensive reactionary race, right? That can change depending on their plans. We know from the Queen Walk era that there are some opportunities for Zerg to just take forward bases to take a forward stance, to be aggressive. But even if you aren't necessarily being aggressive, this could be a nicer base because it gets creep spread out there. Which is vision, which is speed, which in his own right is also kind of a protective layer for the Zerg player. Skillous, as a Protoss player, I don't know if I actually like this, to be honest. I actually think that getting a 3rd base is still such a... it's not a given. It's not a given, but it's so common that I feel like it would still be worth it for even the Protoss or the Terran players to take the forward bases. But I will say one more thing. You know, as much as this is a half-seas base, you know, there's a drawback to being safe. So you might not want to take it in general and go, oh, I get a 3rd base anyways. Well, this is kind of a long path. I'm double zoomed out. No, I'm not double zoomed out, but still zoomed out. It's quite a path to take to go defend your 3rd. I'd say most of the 3rds on other maps are maybe like the gas geysers here type situation. So it is a bit of a walk. Yeah, okay. I can see it going both ways. I can see Protoss and Terran taking their regular 3rds and saving this. Maybe not even for a 4th, just again, that kind of, well, one day I'll take it. Scarlett does take this as her 4th, and I think that's generally the way that it's gone for Zerg players on any maps with the safe base. But I've also seen Zerg players, again, just not even bother taking it at all. Take this as a 4th, this is a 5th. Oh no, things are getting kind of wacky. I'll take the safe base. But that is the most important feature of the map. I haven't really gone on to other ones. Otherwise, no natural ramp. So I don't know what this would really look like for PvP, because I don't think you would... PvP would not... This would not be a safe base on PvP. It'd be really weird. You'd be like walking down your ramp, down another ramp, against a guy with force fields. Doesn't sound like a good time. So I don't know if this could be expansion map for PvP. And then you go around, see that she takes this third base. Skillous takes this as the fourth. So kind of closing the distance between the two bases. And we start to look towards here. It gets cut off. We do have kind of the shared corner bases. Things could be fought over as the game goes on. And in the very middle, got a little sight blocker. Rocks actually making this a very, very small choke. No rocks over here, though. And then kind of, I mean, you know, one pretty big space with a lot of sight blockers makes this a bit scary for like a Terran push, but enough of the corridors around here to abuse, I suppose. It's another base with a big main. It is, yeah. If the gateways aren't over here, this would be a lot of dead space. I think we're taking a good look at the map. It's also freaking bright. Good lord. I need to reduce the bloom. There's no Pokemon here that needs it. Bloom. I know it's not Bloom, but that's the only thing I ever remember from Pokemon. Aside from Pikachu. Is this a Blink Stalker attack? It is a Blink Stalker attack. Oh, I wasn't giving this a lot of credit. So charge is on the way, but Skillous is going to go for the control factor here. And this is not looking too bad of an idea. The roaches are not in place. Roach speed is not done. This base just a goner, right? Yes, it is. 300 minerals, plus the drone, plus all that time. It is a loss, but it's also our fifth. So keep that in mind. I really don't think it's that big of a deal. Would have been much worse if she tried to save it and was unsuccessful. So now a lot more roaches are on the way. So Skillous actually needs to kind of be on top of this, not just for the safety of his own fourth, but because you do need to start picking off these roach counts early on. If you do let them get to a sizable roach force, then Blink Stalkers will get overwhelmed. Well, killing the Roachborn is one of the ways to do that, taking a few extra shots thanks to those transfuses, but it does eventually go down. And this is actually just already too... This is already too chaotic. This actually was not a good move at all. No, this is not going to work out. Even without the closeness of the roaches that were actually going over here, they turned back pretty quickly. She divvied up the army and turned back pretty quickly. Even without those returning home, that was already going to be a real cluster F of a situation. The Stalkers really need to be balled up, picking off things almost casually, reflexively blinking, not aggressively, and that just didn't happen there. It makes the Blink Stalker play look really weak, I think, when you do that. Where if Skillous had been able to find that army going across the map and said, like, hey, where you going, and try to track it, I think this would be 100 times better. Skillous would still be in control of the game, and a fourth base would be up and running, and Scarlett would have had to have made a more difficult decision to kind of ram through the Stalkers that were controlling her army, or to just try and sit back on her heels and defend. But this just went so damn well for Scarlett. Very one-sided game, and I think we are going to continue seeing some one-sided PvZs from the non-heroes of the world as they continue to find their own place in the world. I think Protosses are still having a bit of an identity crisis when it comes to PvZ, as the changes are still relatively fresh, and then a brand new map pool as well, which Protoss, I would say, generally have a lot of trouble on. Where exactly can they abuse their force fields? How far away does it take their base? So on and so forth. I think Terrans figure out the aggression a bit quickly, so I've always given Terrans the benefit when it comes to new maps. And then Protosses, I think, are the ones that trip over them a little bit more. But anyways. And then just not, I think, being hero, right? So some of them are still trying to figure out how to use, you know, Void Ray openers occasionally. Still trying to make that a thing. You got people, you know, still doing Resonant Glaive openers. That's always been fine. You got people trying to go back into Charge that Archon. which is the older way of playing before Void Ray swooped in. And then you do have people who actually try and play the Blink Stalker game, and they no doubts are studying and even straight up copying Heroes builds. I actually don't doubt this. I think eventually it'll diversify and people doing kind of their own thing, and they'll say like, oh, I haven't watched a hero game in a while, sure, but you listen to pros and they're almost always talking about some leading figure of their race, and it's got to be hero in this matchup. But it still doesn't mean that they can actually use it effectively, because it is such a intuitive style as well. It really is not a build up, hit your macro cycles perfectly, and you've got yourself a good timing. Which on a professional level, that's not giving PvZ a lot of credit. And I do think there is more credit to give to Protoss players than just that, but even still, I would say there's so much more to figure out when it comes to the style of play. Okay, that's gonna be it. That was quite a good fungal, wasn't it? I almost tried to give credit to Skillous, and then that fungal hit, and I was like, oh, well, never mind. I can continue talking about whatever the hell I want, because this game is dunzos. GG. GG. Skillous had a good run, but Scarlett's definitely looking more confident on these maps. The last game, Game of 3, when Skillous did win, it was kind of a more classic PvZ dilemma, which happens. But as far as the control over this series, I think Scarlett's pretty much always had it. Skillous looks still like he's in an experimental stage. He's kind of like a teenager right now. And I think a lot of Protosses are kind of feeling like teenagers. They have an idea of what they should be doing. They have some guidance from, a parental figure, but they need to figure out their own life. They need to figure out which phase they're actually going to choose to stay in. And unfortunately for them, they don't have much time. They have a lot of time between Valencia and that patch that happens that changed the Void Rays and changed the Queen All-In. Yes, that is true. But even still, that takes a while to actually figure out. And then bam, new maps that aren't even ladder maps. You're telling everyone to go get customs or, play on maps that aren't viable anymore. Like, it's going to be a confusing time, I think, for the Protoss race more so than anyone else. I really do empathize with the Protoss when it comes to new maps and new metas. But they'll figure it out eventually. Skillous actually is not going to Valencia. Visa issues for him. But I do believe Scarlett is going thanks to Shopify Rebellion, even though she didn't make top 2 of North America. So Valencia's going to be awesome. Hope you guys are watching it while watching this. And I hope you guys enjoyed the cast in general. This was definitely an opportunity for me to kind of get more familiar with the new maps. So it was not so much about like the hype and the awesomeness as much as it was about just kind of checking things out, seeing how things are going, and seeing where the new metas are coming from. So Scarlett, maybe we'll see some of what she did in this best of in Valencia. That does it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.